You're listening to an African Elements top news story for April 16, 2025. Please visit our website at africanelements.org for more daily news. Protecting Child Soldiers in Conflict Zones 2023. Crisis Grave Violations. Children, a Humanitarian Crisis, by Darius Spearman, African Elements. The year 2023 brought devastating news for children caught in the crossfire of global conflicts. Reports reveal a heartbreaking surge in violence against young lives. This demands our immediate attention, especially concerning its impact on communities within the African diaspora and across the continent. Understanding the scale of this crisis is the first step toward demanding change and better protection for our children. In 2023, the world witnessed the highest number of grave violations against children ever recorded by the UN. A staggering 32,990 verified violations occurred across 26 conflict zones. These aren't just numbers, they represent stolen childhoods and unimaginable trauma. Grave violations are specific, severe acts defined under international law. They include killing or maiming children, recruitment as soldiers, sexual violence, abduction, attacks on schools or hospitals, and denying humanitarian access. These acts form the basis for protecting minors in conflict zones. The crisis hit certain areas particularly hard. The occupied Palestinian territory saw 8,434 verified violations, the highest concentration reported. Furthermore, conflicts in Africa contributed significantly to these grim statistics. The Democratic Republic of Congo recorded 3,805 violations, while Somalia faced 2,290. These figures underscore the vulnerability of children, particularly those of African descent, in regions destabilized by prolonged conflict. The rise in violations translated directly into more young lives lost or forever altered. In 2023, 5,001 children were killed in conflict zones. Additionally, 6,248 were maimed or injured. This represents a shocking 35% increase compared to previous years, signaling a dangerous escalation. On average, 31 children were killed or maimed every single day last year. The sheer scale of these casualties is difficult to comprehend. Certain conflicts stand out for their devastating impact. Over one-third of all documented killings and maimings involved Palestinian children. The conflict in Ukraine also inflicted heavy tolls. There, 1,389 children were wounded and 551 killed. Moreover, an estimated 20,000 Ukrainian children were forcibly transferred to Russian-occupied territories. Forcible transfer means moving civilians within their own country using coercion or force, a practice illegal under international law. The recruitment and use of children by armed forces and groups also saw a worrying increase. In 2023, 8,755 children were verified as recruited, a surge linked to escalating crises worldwide. Children are often forced or coerced into joining armed groups, robbed of their youth, and exposed to horrific violence. This practice tears families apart and leaves deep scars on communities. Specific examples highlight the grim reality, particularly in African nations. In Sudan, there was a devastating five-fold increase in violations, rising from 317 to 1,759 cases, largely driven by recruitment. A Sudanese militia reportedly recruited 74 boys aged 14 to 17 as combatants and deployed them on the front lines. Similarly, in Somalia, a jihadist group recruited 10 children aged 15 to 17 for training camps. Consequently, these actions demonstrate a blatant disregard for international laws protecting children. Another devastating trend in 2023 was the sharp rise in the denial of humanitarian access. There were 5,158 verified incidents where aid crucial for children's survival was blocked. This tactic prevents essential supplies like food, water, and medicine from reaching vulnerable populations. Subsequently, it obstructs critical care for malnourished and injured children, turning aid into a weapon of war. The situation was particularly dire in the occupied Palestinian territories. This region experienced 3,250 incidents of blocked aid, the highest number ever recorded for a single conflict zone. Blocking aid is recognized as one of the 6 grave violations against children in conflict. Ultimately, this highlights how systemic barriers are erected, preventing life-saving assistance from reaching those who need it most, especially children suffering from the direct and indirect effects of violence. The backdrop to these increasing violations is the growing number of children living in harm's way. In 2023, an estimated 473 million children resided in conflict-affected areas. This figure represents nearly 1 in 5 children globally. Shockingly, this number has almost doubled since the 1990s, indicating a worsening global environment for children's safety. This trend points towards significant challenges in protecting children amidst expanding crises. The failure to prevent and resolve conflicts places millions more young lives at risk each year. Moreover, the systems designed to protect children appear overwhelmed or unable to cope with the scale and intensity of modern warfare, leaving countless children exposed to violence, exploitation, and deprivation. The immense human suffering caused by conflict also carries a staggering economic cost. In 2023, the global economic impact of violence and conflict reached an estimated $19.1 trillion. This figure represents resources diverted away from development, healthcare, education, and peacebuilding initiatives. The cost includes direct expenses like military spending, as well as indirect costs like healthcare for victims and long-term reconstruction efforts. Meanwhile, global military spending soared to $2.4 trillion in the same year. This massive investment in warfare starkly contrasts with the funding allocated to preventing conflict and protecting civilians, especially children. Therefore, the vast sums spent on conflict significantly overshadow investments aimed at achieving peace and stability, widening the gap needed to protect the world's most vulnerable. The devastating statistics from 2023 paint a grim picture for children in conflict zones worldwide, with particularly harsh realities faced in places like Sudan, Somalia, the DRC, and the occupied Palestinian territories. Record levels of killings, maimings, recruitment, and denial of aid demand urgent global action. Protecting our children must become a priority that transcends borders and politics. It requires a fundamental shift away from conflict and towards peace, accountability, and robust protection mechanisms for every child, everywhere. Copyright African Elements.